All right, perfect. So as I mentioned today, we are going to have the joint presentation. There will be a portion provided by the Metro North Career Center Assistant Director, and there will be a portion provided by the board, by us specifically, related to the fiscal process, related to the review or ITA request and the master agreement, and some sort of high overview of the flow of the process. I want to sort of remind and go over quickly the items that we see here. Before we come to an approval of the training request, the very first step will be signing a master agreement. After that, the provider will need to make sure that all appropriate information is entered in Training Pro. That includes the start date, the end date, the cost information, the schedule, which is really important. Let's say the cost of the program exceeds our current cap. You will need to make sure that if there's a scholarship provided or there is financial aid, that needs to be checked off in Training Pro on your end, which on our end, we will see that in Moses. And I think I talked to many of you about that through the phone calls, emails. If you don't see such option exist in the system, you would click Other, where you will spell it out. Release of information, another important step. We will not be able to proceed with the review of ITA request if it's not obtained. So this is something that is administered by the training vendor with the Career Center. After the ITA request is signed by both the training vendor and the Career Center management, it will be sent to us. We will review it, and you will need to wait for the voucher to be sent. That's the moment when the customer basically can be notified that they can start, they're approved and they can start the program. All right, so now for some reason, I'm not able to move the slides. Something is happening again, although it was fine before. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so we can try it that way. All right, so now I'm going to pass it to Leanne Johnson, the Assistant Director of Metro North Career Centers in our region. Leanne, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thank you, Natalia and Jenny. It's great that we're doing the collaboration presentation together. I have been the director in Metro North the last 5 years, so I've probably come across many of you, but some of you are new to us. And so I'm going to walk through the process for the job seekers so that you as the training providers understand all of the things that we do on the Career Center side during the process before they can start training with you. So under WIOA, which is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, it's the legislation that guides us all, myself and the board, and everything that we have to do in order to use this funding. A customer has to, at a minimum, meet with us. We have to do an evaluation, we have to do an assessment, and we have to provide career planning services, and so that we can determine if they need training. So this is not a case with the WIOA funds where if someone wants training, they get training. We have to take a look at the person as a whole and figure out whether or not that training is what they need to get employed. The training has to be directly linked to employment opportunities in the Metro North area or within a distance the customer is willing to commute and relocate. So we have to look at the labor market information that's local to us to make sure that if they go to a training, there's employment opportunities for them at the end of that training. Also, our role is to provide information to customers that ensures that they make informed decisions. So, and about both all of the providers that are on the ETPL list, the eligible training providers list, and also other grant funded trainings available. So they might come in with an idea of what training they want to go to, but we don't just focus only on that training. We do a whole process with the customer so that they are as informed as possible, and that whatever they end up going to for training, they understand what all of their options are and what all of the opportunities they have available to them. We have to review all possible funding sources with the customer, and the WIOA funding has to be used as a last resort. So if there's other financial aid available or other ways to pay for trainings, that has to come before using the WIOA money. The training course has to be approved by the state, so you have to be on the ETPL. And then also our local board, which they'll talk about their process when it comes to their part of the presentation, they need to approve each course. So even if you have a master agreement and you as a training provider is approved, each course that you have has to be also approved locally. And for some customers, they access Section 30 if they're collecting unemployment. Section 30 allows them to possibly get an extension if they need it. And it also waives their requirement to look for work while they're in an approved training program. So if the customer is seeking Section 30, then the training program also has to be approved under that guidance as well. You can go ahead, Natalia. And let me know if there's any questions in the chat, because I don't think I can see it. So this is the process that the job seekers go through when they come to our centers, and also why we do the different pieces. So the first thing that we do is we have everyone attend a virtual career advising and training information session. The reason is it's a lot of repetitive information. And so we put the customers into groups and we go through all of the information with them. Currently, we offer this on a weekly basis. We have about 14 seats a week and they are always full. So we're constantly putting this information out for customers. That information session covers the whole process from the beginning to the end so that they know what all the steps will be. We talk about what the eligibility requirements are as far as for them as the individual to be eligible to receive WIOA funding. We also give them information about the ETPL. We talk about the importance of labor market information. We share with them other grant information, and we also talk about the commitment on both parts for the career planning partnership. And we let them know about our retention services for after they get employed. We give the customer a blank training proposal document to be able to begin their research. So we have a training proposal that covers all the pieces in order for us to look at the justification for training. Also, all of the documents are on our website, and we email them the link after the end of the session. So they get everything. The process is very transparent for the customers. After they attend the session, some customers decide they're not interested, or maybe they realize themselves that they're not eligible. Oh, go back. Sorry, Natalia. But if they do decide to move forward, they're scheduled from that session for a one-on-one meeting with the career advisor. We do them either via Zoom or in person right now. The career advisor will review with the person their documentation for WIOA, so we'll see if they themselves are eligible. And then also we do an initial intake of their work history, their educational background, their skills, and what their barriers to employment are. So this is the beginning of the assessment for the individual. Then the customer would provide us their eligibility documents, either via secure email or in person. This is proof of work or authorization. They have to be selective service compliant. And then there's specific program eligibility, such as unemployment, SNAP, or other documents, depending on which funding source that we're using. Now you can go ahead. And then they attend a one-on-one career planning meeting with their career advisor. So from here, it's just the career advisor will continue to meet with the person however many times it takes to go through the next steps of the process. So for some individuals, it's less meetings and less time, and some people need a little more time or more meetings and more assistance from their career advisor. So the training proposal covers an assessment of their skills, abilities, educational background, their work history. We're looking to see if the customer is marketable without training. Is training really necessary for reemployment and self-sufficiency? We look at the labor market with the customer. We want to look at if there are jobs in the field. What are the salary? Is it a salary that they need in order for them to take that employment? What's the education and experience requirements? Is the field growing or declining? Right. And we want to determine if their work search experience and their informational interviews support the need for training, especially for those customers who might already have a degree or certifications. Our priority is on populations without advanced degrees. So we will assist some customers with advanced degrees, but in those cases, we really have to show, do they need more training in order to get employed, despite the fact that they have those degrees. We want to determine if the customer has the background and skills that combined with the training will prepare them to go to work. So we don't want to have a case where wherever the customer is starting, they go to the training, but they still don't have everything they need, because in order to get a particular job, there's more than just that training that they need. So we want to make sure that they're going to come out of that training and be ready to be employed. We want to help the customer research and compare at least 2 training providers. So they always have to look at multiple providers. They want to look at things like if the provider is the best fit for their learning style, what's the certifications that are going to come out of it? Can they do the schedule? Is it remote? Is it in person? There's all these different questions. And the best way for a customer to make an informed decision is to compare more than one provider so that they can see what the differences are. And we also need to make sure that the customer will commit to active engagement in individualized services with the career advisor, both through the completion of training and reemployment. So we're here to help them through training, after training, get employed. And we want to make sure that they understand that it's not just an application for training funds and then you're done. You're working with us one-on-one now. And from that, we make the employment plan. Go ahead, Natalia. Thank you. Once the training proposal document is complete, we review it internally between the career advisors and the management. We confirm that they're eligible as an individual for the program, and that we look at the training justification. If it meets approval, then the career advisor starts the ITA request form and sends it to you for signature. Once you return it completed, along with the customer release of information, then we submit both to the board for approval. It's really, 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 really important that the customer cannot start a training until the ITA is approved by the board, and the career advisor communicates this to the customer and the training provider. The training provider must receive the voucher from the board before they start. If a customer starts a training before all of that takes place, then there's no requirement for it to be paid for by the board. It could risk the training being paid for. After the approvals are obtained, including board approval, the career advisor will also let the customer know that they're approved to begin training. Then the customer may not start the program until the voucher is received. I think I saw a question pop up. What's the average time it takes for a customer to secure an ITA following all the steps described? It's really varies, but right now we're saying 4 to 8 weeks. If a customer does all of the pieces they need to do quickly, then they can move through quickly. Also, some customers, when you do that initial assessment with them, it might be really obvious that they need training. So the justification is fairly easy. For an individual, like example with the advanced degree, we have to do a little more work to see if they truly need that training. So it could take a little bit longer. It also takes longer if the course information is not correct and up to date in Moses, if the start and end dates are not correct in Moses or Training Pro on your side. So there's a lot of pieces, or the timeliness of us getting the signed ITA back from training providers as well. So there's pieces that are on the job seeker plate with our career advisors, and then there's pieces that are on the training provider plate. So the whole process, we just say right now, is taking 4 to 8 weeks, depending on many variables. Go ahead, Natalia. So I also wanted to talk about, because this happens fairly frequently as well, that an individual might come to you as the training provider before they come to the career center. And so because you know that we have funding and they could be eligible for that funding, sometimes you'll refer the customer back to us. And so I think it's important for us to clarify what that process looks like, and that those individuals still need to go through the entire process that I just stated. We do have a flyer that's going to be sent out to you after this presentation that we've made, that gives a quick summary of what the process is for someone looking for training funds, and it gives them our contact information. So the best thing to do would be to give them that flyer and let them know that there's a process for applying for training funding. We want to make sure that they understand this process is beneficial to them so that they can make an informed decision, and that they need to know before they come to us that it takes a little bit of time. We cannot have someone walk in and they start training the next week. It will not happen in any scenario. And so we want to make sure that in order to not frustrate the job seekers, that we're giving them, a realistic view of what that process will be. And also for them to understand that even though you're referring them and we respect that, we still need to tell them about all of their options. We still need to do a full assessment with them. It may be that the training provider who sent them to us is the best one for them, and they may go to that course. It may be that there's another option that's actually better for that individual. And for us, we need to give them all of those options. And then also, on the training provider side, it's really important that the ITA form is filled out completely and accurately and sent back to us in a timely manner. If you are providing financial aid, then we need the scholarship letter along with the ITA. Sometimes that can hold up the process. Our current cap is $8,000 for occupational skills training, and it's $10,000 if that's combined with an ESL or Del Ed component. The customer is not to pay for anything, books, exams, fees, anything, and that's alone is them paying. Them being billed later is them paying. They're not supposed to pay for anything according to the master agreement in Metro North. So it's really important that we know what all the costs are up front. So the other thing that is helpful and will help the process flow best is if from the training providers, we have the most accurate information about the tuition costs, book costs, exam fee costs, what's actually covered in the training pro and what's not covered in that. If there's going to be any outside expenses, we need to know everything up front so that we can ensure that it's all paid for the customer. We need the contact information and performance information to be up to date in training pro. Sometimes that can slow things down. Once the contract is in place and the customer starts, it's really important that changes are not made without going back through us and the board for approval. There has to be an ITA modification. So this can be end dates, this can be curriculum, this could be schedule, class time changed from 2 p.m. to 8 a.m. Anything like that has to be pre-approved by our board, and we have to be notified. And to connect with a career advisor if there's any issues that arise as soon as possible so that we can work together on the customer's behalf. I'm going to check the chat question real quick. Talk about more who is eligible so we can assess them to refer back to the Career Center. I mean, in very simple terms, I will say that there's 2 buckets of WIOA funding. One bucket is primarily for unemployed individuals. They might be collecting unemployment. They might not be collecting unemployment. There's a few different exceptions around that. So I would say primarily if someone's unemployed, it's worth sending to us for us to check for eligibility. And the other bucket is low income, which is primarily could be individuals receiving cash assistance, SNAP, Chapter 115 if they're veterans. They could be experiencing homelessness, or they could have basic skills deficiency. So that's very broad, but we'd rather screen people in. So if you think anybody falls into one of those 2 buckets, then you send them our way and we'll take a look. As far as our partnership, I just wanted to touch really quickly that we really are partners. I think with COVID, it's hard to do everything so virtually when we used to be probably a little bit more connected prior to COVID. But to know that we're together in this, we have the same goal. We want these individuals to have the best option to complete training and then to get employed. Our career advisors might reach out to you to check in on the progress and attendance of our customers. I know you fill out the monthly progress reports as well. You can feel free to reach out to the career advisors. If someone misses a class, if they're falling behind, the sooner we know, the sooner we can help them. And on your ITA for each customer, the career advisor for that customer signs it. So if you're not sure who the career advisor is for a particular customer, their name is going to be on that ITA. And when in doubt, if you email Natalia or I or Jenny, we can get you to who is the career advisor. We can share employment information with each other. That's why we have that signed release, is both to share customers' progress, any barriers, any issues they're having, but also employment, because you need the employment for your performance and we need the employment for our performance. And at the end of the day, it's all about the customer getting employed. So we can share that information with each other. Also, we just want to find other ways to develop the relationships between our staff and the staff at the training providers. These were ideas we had pre-COVID, and I left them in the presentation. They were here since the last time we met before we went virtual. But one of the things that we do, and we did pick back up this year, is every year we usually pick about 2 months where we'll send an email blast out to all of you and ask, do any of you want to present information on your training program to our career advisors? And then we'll schedule you in blocks to do that. So we did do that recently, but some of you, if you're newer training providers, or if you had staffing change, you may not have gotten that notification. So we can follow up with you again if you'd like to do that. I think that's it on my slides, right, Natalia? Thank you. I'm gonna see. So we really, we want to work together. So feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. I think a lot of these items we want to sort of remind and reiterate, as we know that many of you are doing all those processes. And as I would say that every region works differently. However, there are certain requirements that all MassHire workforce boards in the regions need to follow under the guidelines of Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And that includes the career assessment, the eligibility. That is the reason why we can process the ITA request if all of those steps are complete. So upon receipt of the ITA request on our end, we will review the file, the customer's file for WIO eligibility. As Leanne mentioned, we would look for certain things as those would relate to eligibility. We will review information about the customer's barriers to employment, and that would include, the education background. As we mentioned, if somebody is with advanced degree, we would need to see if there's a robust justification. We would need to see what are those other barriers. And as Leanne mentioned, there's a lot of work that the Career Center needs to do with the customer prior sending the ITA request form. And all of those items basically are getting complete before the form is sent to us. We will review information about the training provider. So first step, we will check if there's a master agreement on file. The second one, we will check if the course is approved for the current fiscal year. Another part I wanted to mention is we also will look and just to make sure that the provider is approved within the state, right? So we're looking for those particular items just to make sure there are no gaps in the process. Because if, let's say, the provider is not approved by the state, and even if we have master agreement on file, this could be a barrier for us to move forward. We will notify the Career Center manager whether the ITA request is approved or denied, or we have additional questions. Then the next step, a very important step, is that we will create the voucher. We will send it to the provider and the Career Center manager. And the most important part to keep in mind is that the customer may not start the training if the voucher is not received by the provider, and the payments do not go directly to the customer. So a couple of things related to, again, to the fiscal process and how it's being done, and how moving forward, we will be implementing some kind of slight changes just to make sure we have, the process going smoothly and efficiently. As Leanne mentioned, we have our current gap. It's $8,000 for the skills training. If the training includes ESOL component in conjunction with occupational skills training, that is $10,000. As we see, that is actually the big need in our region to have the ESOL. All training costs, just give me 1 second, I apologize. All right, so here I want really to take some time and talk about that, as sometimes we have those questions from providers, we have those conversations, phone calls, emails, and please continue to reach out. Please continue emailing us if you need a phone call. I understand sometimes there could be confusion, frustration about the training pro, how do I enter the information here, and things like that. So, but a couple of things to keep in mind is that all training costs shall match information and training pro, and they should be listed on the ITA request form that must be submitted and approved prior the start date of the training program. As we mentioned, there should be no out-of-pocket costs to the customer. An example case scenario could be is that, let's say there's a training program that would include potential exam, but sometimes the provider may leave it sort of up to the customers and make it a voluntarily that the customer wants to go for an exam. And that would mean that the customer will need to pay for it. This is where we would see the challenge, because on our end, under WIOA, the ITA funds could be provided for training that would result in an industry recognized certification, right? Or the occupational certificate that would prepare customer to work in a specific occupation with a certain skill set. If the voucher is not provided and the exam is sort of up to the customer, we might not be able to move through the process. We will have to communicate with the provider, as the exam cost cannot be on the shoulder of the customer. Any training cost, again, above the ITA voucher amount must be provided either through waivers, scholarships, grants, or some other funds. The training vendor will need to submit an invoice with an attendance record to the board once the customer attended the program for 10 calendar days. And here I want to pause, as I know probably there are some folks here in the group that we've talked back and forth. We are now keeping it as 10 calendar days. We there was confusion whether it's the training days or calendar days. We want to highlight that for the providers. This is going to be 10 calendar days. In event if, let's say, a student is leaving the program prior those 10 days, then the board will defer to the provider refund policy. If provider does not have a refund policy, then we would look at our own refund policy. The provider will need to notify the board as well as the Career Center in writing if there are any changes. As Leanne mentioned, sometimes there could be certain things on the customer's end, on the training provider end, that would cause the changes in either the schedule or cost or curriculum. All of that needs to be communicated with the Career Center and the board. Modification to the contract cannot be made unless it is communicated with the Career Center and it's authorized and approved by the board. Couple of things we want to sort of remind and reiterate, as well as, again, kind of clarify some items here. So the first thing is geographic requirement. We work with customers who are coming through the Career Center. If they're looking for ITA funds under WIOA, the requirement is that they need to reside or work, or they were laid off from the company that is located in one of those 20 cities and towns in Metro North workforce development area. The exception here will be the veterans and eligible spouses. There are no residence restrictions to that specific population. Training pro data entry requirement. Very often we see the ITA request comes in and we don't have schedule information updated in the system. Sometimes we have a customer who is inquiring about particular training program, but it's showing to us that the last training, the end date was December 2022, and they're no longer running the program. That could be not the case. We are reaching out to the training provider, and it turns out that the program is up and running. The provider just didn't have a chance to update it. Please make sure you stay on top of it. So in our end, we will see that through the Job Quest website. Please make sure you are constantly updating the cost information, the exam fees, whether or not it's included, whether or not the voucher is included. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the program completion requirements. Program outcome is really important for the Career Center and the board specifically when it comes to a moment of course approval, when we are reviewing those pending courses, we're looking at the program outcomes. Sometimes what we see is that the provider either does not spell out, does not clarify what is the program under description and what is the program outcome, whether or not it's going to be certificate, right? So please remember to include all those items. If the customer, let's say case scenario, paralegal certificate, if the customer is eligible to go through an exam where he's going to be certified by the association, the national accredited organization, after, and go through an exam, you will need to spell it out. Basically, we're looking for information where it says that the customer is eligible to sit through an exam upon successful completion of the program. Is it certificate or license or certification? Please make sure you check off the appropriate item. Another thing I wanted to mention is, again, as I said, if there's any additional financial aid provided or scholarship, you will need to make sure that you will check that off. I'm trying to think. I had some kind of like a thought in the back of my mind that I think I forgot, but I probably will mention. I also wanted to talk about the priority of services. As of now, the priority of services goes to veterans, low-income adults, individuals that are basic skills deficient, individuals that lack a post-secondary degree, and recently also we have priority of services for 10 non-Metro North residents. Those are usually our partner referrals. We know that throughout the year, we reached out to many of you and we secured the master agreement sometimes at the end of the fiscal year or in the middle of the fiscal year. But the bottom line is that the board will run a performance report through the previously completed fiscal year and also a portion of this year to make sure that we have the data and we will do the assessment whether or not those outcomes will meet the performance requirements. If we see that the provider does not meet the performance requirements, we will send a formal notification to the training provider with a request to submit an action plan. There are programs that have less than 5 individuals in the fiscal year. So we will look at the previous year record and combine that in order to do the further assessment and see if we can reach to the minimum of 5 individuals. As far as the performance requirements, in our local region at the Metro North, contractors must meet the following performance requirements in order to remain on the list of eligible training providers. So that is 70% program completion rate and 65 job placement rate, where 65% should be training related. Job placements must be unsubsidized employment for a minimum of 20 hours per week and retained for at least 30 days in order for us to count that as a job placement. All right, so that concludes our presentation. Now I want to leave it up to the group, to Metro North Career Center folks to see if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. I also want to see if we have some questions.
We don't have any questions.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Divya.
Yep.
I have one question. This was regarding a schedule change, like we create a schedule for the students, and if there is an unforeseen event in which either the student is sick or the trainer or something happens, then the schedule will be slightly changed. In that case, I heard Leanne mention that we have to submit the request to the career counselor. and then the board will approve the change, only then the change can be made, right?
Do you want me to?
Yes, Leanne, absolutely.
That's okay. So I think there's two different things. Like one, absence because someone is sick is not a modification. But when a schedule is changed that causes a whole course to change, like maybe it goes from
Okay.
2 p.m. in the afternoon to 8 a.m. in the morning, because you have to remember that some of these individuals might have childcare, they might have other responsibilities. And so when they sign up for your training program, they're signing up knowing what that schedule is. And when the schedule changes on them,
Okay.
sometimes it causes people to not be able to complete the program, and it's not their
Okay.
fault. And so we've already invested all this time and energy and money. So if something happens with an instructor though, and it causes a change that like the next section is going to be a totally different schedule, then yes, that requires a modification and pre-approval from the board.
Okay. Okay. So if it's just a little schedule change and nothing in the training is going to change, then it's fine. But
I'm saying
any,
if someone's out sick one day, that's
yeah,
fine. If it's a
okay.
schedule change period that's ongoing, it needs to go, and the career advisor needs to know, and the board needs to approve, because we want our individuals to be successful. And if
Right,
there's
right.
schedule changes, they're not going to be successful.
Okay,
So
got it.
yes, and when in doubt, reach out to the career advisor. It's better to tell us and talk to us, and then we can say, yes, that requires a modification or not.
Okay, sounds,
Communication is important.
thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. So we have some comments or questions in the chat. I'm not sure if we covered that. But again, so as far as the copy of this presentation, yes, we will be sending the copy of this presentation. I think there was a few, at least 2 questions about that. We covered the average time. There was a question about eligibility. Can you speak more about who's eligible so we can best assess who to refer back to the Career Center? I think, Leanne, you covered some of it.
I answered it, yeah.
Laid off, or somebody who is currently underemployed, but may, is a recipient of any public benefits, or at the last case scenario, may even do the eligibility based on the income that they provide, right? According with the lower living standards. The last question we have here, how do we know if the client has been working the 20 hours? So here I would say is that there is when Leanne mentioned about the retention of our services, so we provide customer with 12 months of follow-up services once they get into employment. The Career Center, and I assume the vendor will be sending so-called outcome form or back to work information, or the customer will report that verbally, where the customer will report on where they work, how many hours per week. We basically ask, is it part-time or full-time? In Moses, on our end, in the database, there's a question. When we report the employment, it's just a question, part-time or full-time. Yes, there's a question, how many hours per week? So if, I guess it's under discretion and under internal protocol of each training organization to determine how the form will look like, whether or not you are asking just a part-time or full-time. We assume that you are collecting the outcome information for your own performance measures purposes. Any other questions? All right, so let's see, we have another one. Does the provider need to keep track? So here, I guess we didn't talk a lot about it, but you hear from me every sort of end of the month when I reach out and ask for progress report. So before the customer ends the program, we, throughout the duration of the program, we reach out for the report where you would provide an update about the academic performance of the customer. And there's not a certain format to that. We see sometimes the providers just submit the form that we have with 3 basic questions, whether or not they completed the minimum hours of requirement or 30 hours, whether or not they completed the program and if they're in a job. So this is where we would track. As far as the, when it comes to the end of the program, if they complete the program and let's say they go through an employment, very often we see, after speaking with many of you, we see that the training provider still will sort of try to get a hold of the customer for various reasons. The employment, record, and those follow-up services, whether it's, additional support as an alumni, or some additional advanced training that they want to do in the future. Anybody wants to add comments or questions? Again, please do not be shy. Do not hesitate to reach out. Still Jenny, myself. But if you have any comments, thoughts, feedback, please step up and you can talk or send it via chat. All right. It's amazing. I guess we are sort of wrapping up. Jenny, do you want to add a few words or?
No, I think it was wonderful seeing everyone. We're gonna follow up all of our revised forms. And a master agreement will be coming out by the end of the month. So expect to see that because we want to get a head start for next year and get all the master agreements in place. So that we're ready for July 1. So there's no lag in getting customers started on training programs for next year.
Yes. I think we're still receiving some questions, which is great. I appreciate that. Thank you. Who qualifies as a person verifying employment? And I'm sorry, Steve, could you clarify a little bit more? Are you asking who qualifies as somebody who is checking the employment of the customer, or?
So my question is, sorry, too long to write. In the by the employer, who qualifies as a person verifying employment? So let's say we call a person for verification of employment. Who is that person? Would it be a supervisor? Would it be a human resources person, who are usually, not very keen on answering any questions? But what kind of a person and what capacity with the employer can they serve to verify employment? That's my question. Sorry for the late question, by the way.
No, that's okay. We still have time. We scheduled for 1.5 hours. I think I'm going to start my answer, but please, Leanne or Jenny, jump in. You mentioned somebody as a human resource. I think yes. The job seeker itself, the customer, could sort of report to you. But again, on the employer side, I think it's up to the actual company where they work. But I also would want to highlight, when you collaborate with the Career Center, you are free to communicate with the Career Center. If, let's say, you cannot get a hold of the customer, they sign that seek and release of information. They are aware that their record is shared between multiple entities. So I think kind of that's my understanding here. Leanne, do you have any?
Yeah, so generally we take the self-attestment of the job seeker about their employment for the real-time data, unless we happen to have a connection with the business that we made a referral to, and then we'll get information from the business. There is federal wage matching data that they use later to confirm the data that we enter into the system, but that's about 18 months behind. So when we enter it and when you enter it, my understanding is that it's job seekers attestation. We don't call all the employers on every employment.
Okay, I appreciate the answer. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If I could follow up on that for a second, we had a student, not part of this workforce board, but another workforce board, who got a job, and I don't know whether the term would be politely or not, told us that where she was working, how much she was making, and when she got the job was none of our business. Is she contractually obligated? She's not contractually obligated to me. I understand that.
Yeah.
I wish she was, but she's not. But to report back to you guys or any of the workforce boards across the state a success, the person needs to be willing to share that information. And she actually got a job from a friend of a good friend of my company's. And I sort of had to take a deep breath and not, lose my temper with her. What's the solution to someone who's just, if I had known she was going to take that attitude, I'd take the loss and not get her a job? What do you guys suggest?
Do you want me to answer, Natalia?
Yes, please.
So we do run into this, and there's only so much we can do. So this is why in the beginning, when part of that whole process for us of meeting with the customer and having a relationship with the customer and not getting them into training in a week and less, and they just feel like we're there for the money, but they see us as, we're in this together to help you get employed. That helps to build that relationship. We do have them sign an agreement that they'll give us the employment information, but in all honesty, we have nothing to hold over them if they don't. So what we generally do is if they don't answer our career advisors, then I'll send them something. And sometimes people will respond to me just because it says director. And I say, you receive federal funds and you agreed to give us some information, but I can't really force them. So there's occasions where that happens to us too. But those are all the ways that we try to mitigate it as much as we possibly can.
But is it seen as a success or a failure?
It's a negative if we can't get the information.
Right. And because of that,
Right.
I mean, I was this, and I know who, because we have a career ambassador event every week, and we know these people really well. I was so close to calling them and saying, you should rescind it because she's not going to be a good employee.
Well,
And the woman was
I wouldn't do that, but
$95,000 a year.
yeah, I'll take the one loss for all the people who make it, so we
Yeah.
can't know at the beginning. Everybody will
Right,
say they'll give you the
right.
information,
Right. So I was just wondering if you guys
yeah.
had any contractual
No.
teeth, because we don't. So thank you. I appreciate
But
the
if it
answer.
is funded through us, we should know we are trying to get the information. So we will make that final outreach. And I'll say that when I send something, I get them more often than not, but there's always a couple that escape by. That's an ongoing problem. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think that's it, Natalia. Unless you have any individually
Let's
to
see.
you, I don't see any on the group one.
I'm checking one last time. As far as recording, yes, we're gonna try to make sure that it will be available. Let us get that file once we finish the meeting. But we will share the presentation today, right after the meeting.
I did just want to clarify one point in the presentation. When we were talking about attendance, we said 10 calendar days. I just wanted to be very clear that we need to see 10 days of attendance for the next year, the next fiscal year. We want to see 10 days of attendance. I don't think it matters if we call it training days or calendar days, but just so that we're not, there's no ambiguity on when the start date is and how we're counting, we're just enforcing a straight 10 days. We want to see 10 days of attendance when we see when we receive the invoices.
Thank you. Trying to see. All right. Well, thank you all for attending the meeting. Please feel free to share the presentation within your organization if sometimes we happen to see there are staff changes, somebody coming on board, and they're still learning the process. We want to make sure that everybody is aware how it works in the Metro North region. If there are any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Okay. All right. Well, you have a great day, everybody.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.